Hey Hawks, this is Father Kevin Gillespie, and you're listening to Sports and Rants with Brett and Pants. The Hawk will never die.
And this is Sports and Rants with Brett and Pants, and we're on live with former 76er and Basketball Hall of Famer Billy Cunningham. Billy, thank you for joining us today. We appreciate your time.
Well, it's my pleasure, and I have long ties with St. Joe's. We practiced there for many years when I was involved with the 76ers.
Oh, that's great. Right now it's snowy on Hawk Hill. Where are you calling us from?
Well, I hate to tell you, but it's around 84 degrees where I am. It's sunny.
Oh, wow. Were you in Florida?
Yes, I'm in Florida right now.
Oh, you enjoying the golfing weather?
Well, I'm enjoying the warm weather. I haven't played much golf, but it's surely a little better than what you're experiencing.
So, Billy, we got to know, have you been watching the Sixers this season? Have you been following them?
Yeah, I watch a little of NBA, college, a little bit of everything during the course of the year. The Sixers have this plan, and time will tell if they're right or wrong. We'll see. Hopefully they have a healthy team next year, and they have a good pick in the first round.
As somebody that coached, how difficult is that to just play that waiting game, to watch the young guys develop?
Well, Coach Brown has just done a marvelous job. His patience in dealing with knowing that if he's fortunate, he's going to win between 15 and 20 games during the course of a season. I don't think I have the temperament to be able to deal with something like that, but he just has the ability to get up every day and to have an attitude that he's going to help these players and team to improve. And hopefully at the end of the day, they find a few players that were under a rock that can help contribute at some point for the team.
Now we're going to get right into it with your career. How did you start playing basketball?
Well, I got started at a very early age. I got when I was 5 years old, I got a basketball from my mom and dad. And I just, from that point on, I just kept dribbling or trying to reach the basket. And eventually I was strong enough to do that. And I just fell in love with the game. I can't explain why. Growing up in Brooklyn, there were a lot of schoolyards and places similar to Philadelphia where, people would, guys and girls would go play basketball.
So, like you said, you grew up in Brooklyn. What made you make the decision to go play basketball at UNC?
Well, it was a kind of an easy decision. Right around the block from me, at that time there was a coach at North Carolina before Dean Smith named Frank McGuire. Frank McGuire also coached the Warriors before they moved to San Francisco. And Frank recruited me, but right around the block from my house and where I delivered newspapers was his sister. And to this day, my sister's best friend is his niece. So I knew Frank McGuire's family very well, and when he came to visit my home, he just spent some time with my mom and dad, and my father gave me a choice. Either I go play for Uncle Frank or I go to a Catholic university and play basketball, and I preferred to go to North Carolina at that point in my life.
Okay, and when you were there, you actually were coached by Dean Smith, one of the many consider that one of the best college coaches of all time. Is there anything that he instilled in you during your career there, and that made you want to get into coaching?
And you know what? When I got into coaching, I really didn't think much about it. I just received a phone call out of the blue from Pat Williams asking me if I had some interest in coaching the team, and I really hadn't thought about it at all. But, obviously I made the choice to go into coaching, and there's no question, having played under Dean Smith, and I would spend time in the summer reviewing films of the 76ers, and I would review some films of the University of North Carolina, or we'd spend a few days talking basketball, and he, helped me a great deal in so many ways, in organization, in different philosophies that I carry forward.
Now, as any basketball fan knows, you had unbelievable success at UNC, and you would go 5th overall in the NBA draft. in a draft that had many great NBA players and NBA legends. What was the whole draft process like for you and going to the Sixers?
That's a great question because it's so different that you wouldn't understand it or recognize it today. When I was drafted, they had what they called territorial draft picks. So if you live within a certain distance of a city, for example, Bill Bradley was picked immediately by New York because he lived within a certain amount of miles of there. Gail Goodrich was taken by the Lakers because he went to UCLA and he was within a certain distance of the Lakers team. And so that's kind of one of the things that they had. Now, the next thing was, which was fascinating, I didn't even realize that the day the draft was being held. There was no, I was in the dormitory. I got a phone call, and it was a writer from Philadelphia, I forget which paper, informing me that I was drafted by Philadelphia. I didn't even hear from the team first. So
wow.
It's come a long way from the Stone Ages when I first went into the NBA, and obviously for the better.
What was that like joining the Sixers for the first time in a locker room with all those great players such as Wilt Chamberlain?
Well, it was a great experience. You know, compared to being drafted, say, number one by Philadelphia today. I walked into a winning situation, and immediately I was programmed, or it was shown to me what it takes to become a winning team and a winning player. And that was a great help for me throughout my career. Instead of going to a bad team and having to help it develop, I was fortunate enough to walk into one of the greatest teams of all time.
Coming into Philadelphia, how much did you know about the Sixers fan base, and did players like Chamberlain help you to become familiar?
Oh, absolutely. Wilt Chamberlain helped me, and all my teammates helped me at that time. I was not very familiar with Philadelphia in general, but and when I first got here, but eventually grew very familiar, and we've lived at least a portion of the year, in Philadelphia since 1965, and so it's very close to our family's heart, the city of Philadelphia.
Now, in 1967, many people would say that one of the greatest basketball teams ever assembled was made in Philadelphia. Players such as yourself, Wilt Chamberlain, Hal Greer. What's it like to be considered to have one of the greatest teams of all time?
Well, it was truly special, and we knew we were a special team. And when we won that World Championship, the shame of the thing, after the following season, the team was broken up. The reason it was broken up was one of the owners named Ike Richmond, and a gentleman named Irv Kozloff. The two of them owned the team. The previous year, Ike had passed away from a heart attack, and he also represented Wilt Chamberlain legally. And Wilt and Ike had an agreement that Wilt would get a percentage of the team at some point. Irv Kozloff was never informed about this and did not agree upon it. And at that point, Wilt Chamberlain was traded to the Lakers, and that was kind of the end of the 76ers of that, because that team, if we stayed together, would have won, in my belief anyway, at least one or two more championships.
Now, after several great years with the Sixers, you would move on to the ABA. Could you just describe to us the different type of play style in the ABA compared to the NBA and how the culture was different?
Well, first of all, I absolutely, when I got there, I loved it. The enjoyment of playing, it was a more up-tempo game, quicker tempo than the NBA. A lot of great young players. There weren't, the NBA was the more seasoned, respected league at the time. But I soon found out there were some exceptional players in the ABA, and I loved it. There were players like Julius Erving I played against, George McGinnis, who was a 76er as well, Artis Gilmore, George Gervin. I could go on for quite a while with the type of talent that was in the ABA. And I think at some point the NBA realized that the ABA wasn't going to go away, and they had what they called an absorption or a merger around 1975.
And we're on with Billy Cunningham. Billy, could you just now go into your coaching career, tell the listeners how you got started, and if it was something that you always wanted to do?
No, it wasn't something I always wanted to do, coach. At the time when I did become a coach, I was involved in business, and I was working for CBS doing college and professional basketball on TV. And then I just, out of nowhere, I was asked if I had interest. Obviously, I eventually did coach the team, but I was very fortunate, again, in life when I was a very talented group of men. But we weren't a very great team, and we made some changes and adjustments, and put a very, an outstanding team together, and we're able to go on and win a championship and have a wonderful career, and I just absolutely loved it when I did get involved with coaching.
You mentioned earlier how you would not have the temperament that Brett Brown has now. You coached players such as Bobby Jones, Mo Cheeks, Moses Malone, and Dr. J. Did those players make the job easier for you, coaching?
They were a dream. And I'll tell you why they were a dream. Because one of the things I never had to worry about was them coming ready to play. It didn't matter if we were playing our third game in 3 nights in 3 different cities. They just were so professional, loved what they were doing so much, that my job was just to make sure they were as well prepared offensively and defensively for who our opponent was that night. And with Julius Erving's leadership, he was always ready to play.
How involved were you with acquiring that all-star lineup?
I was very involved. At that time, Pat Williams was the general manager, but we worked together with the owner, Harold Katz and Fitz Dixon. Now, Pat was involved before I got involved with the team coaching in acquiring Julius Erving. From that point on, I was involved in regards to getting Bobby Jones, Maurice Cheeks, Andrew Toney, etc., and Moses Malone from that point on. But we worked, all of us worked very well together because we had one common goal, and that was to build a championship team for Philadelphia.
And Billy, as we begin to wrap up the interview with you, could you just describe to our listeners what you're doing now since retirement from basketball?
Well, what I do is I'm involved in different business ventures, enjoying my family, spending some time in the warm weather, not around snow as you all are in Philadelphia and just such a terrible winter. So I'm enjoying life a little bit more than, I shouldn't say enjoying it anymore, but I'm just in a different phase of my life at this point.
And Billy, before we let you go, can we get a prediction of who's going to win the NCAA tournament from you?
Well, I'm really going to go out on the limb and say Kentucky.
Billy, thank you for joining us today. We appreciated your time, and we learned a lot from you.
Well, thank you so much, and all the best to both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
This concludes our podcast of Sports and Rants with Brent and Pants. Thank you for listening. Please follow us on Twitter at Sports and Rants. Like us on Facebook. Remember to subscribe to us on iTunes. And visit our website, www.sportsandrants.blogspot.com. It would help our rankings on iTunes if you rate and review our podcast. Thanks, and have a good day.